Today, I'm going to be teaching you the basics of Blender. Learning Blender is incredibly overwhelming, so I decided to create this Blender-friendly tutorial for you that will guide you through the process and give you the confidence to start your Blender journey. My aim is to give you a tutorial that is fun and easy to follow, and at the end you will have a house that looks like this. There are 5 parts to this series. Part 1 is going to introduce you to the viewport. Part 2 is going to introduce you to the functionality of the objects. Part 3 is where we'll start modeling the house. Part 4 is where we will model the landscape, and part 5 is where we will texturize everything and render it. So let's jump straight into Blender. So when you open Blender for the first time, you will see this little thing here, and you will basically be able to choose what type of file you want. Now today we are just going to be going with general, so just click that. So here we are in Blender. This is what it's all looking like just here. In the center right here we have the camera, which is this one, the light, and the starter cube. Now if you've tried to learn Blender before, you're probably familiar with how this looks. You probably didn't know how to move around or do anything, so we're going to teach you everything today and make that beautiful house. So let me show you how to pan around to start with. So you can just use your middle mouse button and just pan around like this. I'm using a magic mouse, so I don't actually have to like click in the button and move it around, but just so you know, you can just go like this and that's how you move like that. If you hold control and the middle mouse button, you can actually zoom in and out just like this. So we can go around and then in and out. Now if we hold shift, you can go side to side just like that. So we can go in and we're like, oh, maybe we'll go over there, and then we can also turn around. So that is the basic movement here. And if you just look down here, you'll be able to see what I'm actually doing in the buttons I'm clicking as we go, which hopefully helps with this tutorial so you don't actually get confused. The only thing is because I'm using a magic mouse, you're not going to see the middle button being clicked, but if you're seeing me do this, I'm just panning around with the middle button. So hopefully that's not too confusing, but there you go. If I'm holding control and zooming in and out, you can see what's going on there. So these are the viewport axes. So this is what we're looking like, and you can just also click them like this. We can go to top view, bottom view, if you want to quickly get somewhere like that. You can also click the hotkeys. So these are the first hotkeys. So if you click 1, you're going to go to front view. If you click control 1, you're going to go to the back view. You can click 3 for the side view, control 3 for the opposite view of that, 7 for top view, control 7 for the bottom view, just like that. And I'll pull us back there. So those hotkeys are really important, and that is why you need a numpad, because those hotkeys are in the numpad, and I honestly can't get it to work on like a normal like keyboard without a numpad, so I always use a numpad for that. But yeah, just to go through it again: 1 front view, control 1 back view, 3 side view, control 3 the other side of that view, 7 for the top, and control 7 for the bottom. And then you can just move like that with the middle mouse button, and you can always, if you get stuck, just click to what axis you are after and you're wanting to be at there. So if we now go to this left hand panel here, if you don't have it, click T so you can disappear, click T again and it comes back. I am recording using Loom, so I have this like awkward button here, but just ignore that. So this is your select box, so you can select everything like that or individually select just like that. We also have the cursor. This is the 3D cursor tool. So you can actually individually place it. You can see him just in the center there, but you can place it around so I can like pick it up and move him. If you click Shift and S, you can actually move it back to the world origin, which is really important to know. So that's how you can just move it around there. So if you get confused where your cursor is, you just Shift S, bring him back to the world origin. Next we have the move button, so you can click move and then you can click your cube and you can move it up and down. There are also other ways that you can move. This is just like one way. I don't usually do this like this, but you can if you want to. So click, you can move up the Z, you can move across the Y, and then you can move across the X like that. So just a really easy way to do that. You can also move diagonally across the axes or the other way as well. This is the rotate tool. Works very similar, but you just rotate on the axes. So you can rotate across the X, then we're rotating across the Y, and then rotating across the Z just like that. And you can also see the lines appear as you do it, so you know what axes you're actually working on. This is the scale tool, so you can scale across the Y, scale across the X, and scale across the Z. In Blender, you make a lot of things out of a starting cube, so these things are very important to know how to scale, how to move around, and how to actually work with your cube or whatever object we put in. Alright, the next thing in the viewport is up the top here in object mode. You can click it and you can change the modes. You can also do that by clicking tab. So we basically usually go to edit mode and go back to object mode, and that's what we will be doing for these tutorials. We won't actually be going to any of the other modes, just the basic modes here. So object mode, edit mode, you can just tap through them like that. Up the top here are the different workspaces. We're not going to be doing modeling, we're not going to be doing sculpting or UV editing or texture painting, but we will be using the shader tab, which is just here. And then also there's an animation tab, rendering tab, compositing, geometry nodes, and sculpting. So we're going to be in layout. If you're confused about where you are and your workspace looks different, just make sure you're in layout. Moving on over here, we're currently on transform orientations of global, and you want it to be global for this. As you get more advanced, you can go through and change the transform orientations if you want to, but we're going to be working with global today. Here we have the snap tool. We're going to go through how to use this later, and then we also have the proportional editing tool. If something is going wrong and you are doing stuff and it doesn't look like what I'm doing and a lot of things are just looking crazy, just make sure these aren't turned on. You can just see when they're on they are blue, and when they're off they are grey, so make sure these just aren't turned on. We need them off for now. Moving over to the right hand side, we have the viewport shading, so we can actually turn it into X-ray. So you can turn on the X-ray mode. As you can see, the little cube here turns into an X-ray, and if we go into edit mode, you can actually see all the individual vertexes like that. We can turn that off. We can go into the wireframe mode, so you can just see the wireframe. This is really helpful if you've got a lot of objects going on everywhere. This is the solid mode, so there's no texturing or anything applied here. This is the mode that I usually edit in. Then we have the material preview, so if there were materials applied, you'd be able to see them applied just here, but this is just a white cube to start with. And then we have the rendered preview. So as you can see what's going on here, we have the light. So if I was just to move the light, you can actually see it move live. So this is really good if you're wondering what everything is going to look like rendered without having to render it all. You can pull it into this mode. Next, we have the scene collection, and it's important to always keep this clean. I do struggle to do that, but just you can name your different things. So the camera will come through as a camera, but if you have, say, 4 cubes, you can name them what they are, and then you can also hide them like this, or you can hide them by just selecting them and pressing H. And then you can bring them back. You can also hide them from the viewport render, so when it's rendered they don't actually turn up. So you can just do that by clicking the little camera button here. Just here along these cute little buttons. So we've got item, which is like basically the location of everything. We have the tools, which I'm not really going to go through all of this, but the one that is like really important is camera to view. I use this a lot because you can press 0, go into your camera, and you can actually move your camera where you want it, and then you can select that off and go out of camera mode, and it's moved. It's very handy that you don't have to like manually place your camera around and like move it, because I find that really frustrating. So I always use camera to view just there. We also have create. We won't go through that. And this is my screen keys. We have this so that you can see what I'm actually doing. So these are the properties just here. And so we'll go through the start of them. These are just the workspace settings. This is the rendered properties, and we're going to render in cycles. So we can actually change this, and I can explain a little bit. So if we go to cycles, and we're going to go GPU compute, and then I'm also going to change the max samples just to start with to 200, and that just means when it's rendering, it's not going to render like 4,000 samples. It's going to render a lot less samples. It will render faster, but the more samples you have, you know, the nicer the render will turn out. We have denoise, which will denoise, make it less blurry, and that's kind of all of the ones we're going to use. There's so many things you can do here and play with, but this is just like the basics. This is also the viewport, so when we go to viewport now, and you can see like it's a little bit blurry because it is rendering all these samples for us. So a little bit different than Eevee, where it was just like a box. But I usually go in this mode so that my computer doesn't cry. This is the output properties. So if you go back to the camera, you can change the size of the camera and your exports there. You can also change the frame rate if you are going to be animating. You can also change the frame. So down here we have like the timeline. So you can choose the start and end of that. This is the output settings if we are exporting animations. Then we have the layer properties just here, and I'll just keep all of this as just standard. I don't don't usually play around with this too much. This is the same properties as well, and once again, I wouldn't fiddle in here as a newbie in Blender, but just so you know where it all is. These are your world settings. You can actually change the color of your background. If you go back here and say we want it to be blue, now your background is blue, but I will just keep it on the standard grey just for now. But you can also change a bunch of settings in here, but just standard. These are your collection settings. These are the same. These are your object properties, and I will show you how to use these when we go into object mode. These are your physics properties, so you can actually click this, and I'll show you a quick example if we go into this mode. I realize we missed the modifiers. These are the modifiers, and there is a lot of modifiers. I probably use about 6 of these. I don't use all of them, and what they do is that they are automatic operations that affect an object's geometry in a non-destructive way. So they are my best friend, and they will be your best friend. And yeah, there's a huge list here, and we've got particle properties. We probably won't be doing any of that today. We've got these physics properties, and these control the behavior of the object in a simulated physical environment. By applying these properties to an object, you can create realistic simulations of movement, collisions, and other physical phenomena. So these are object constraints. They control the attributes and settings of mesh objects such as their shape, topology, and UV map. These properties are unique to each object and can be modified independently from the object's transform properties. The last one is material properties. This is where you will add in different materials to your object, and I will go more in depth when we are texturizing, but just to show you right now, we can change the color of the cube. If you want to see that, just there. So that is everything that's going on here. So that is the viewport. I hope you picked up a little bit of information about Blender at this point. Don't worry if some of it doesn't make sense yet. Going through tutorials is definitely the best way to learn and develop your skills. The second part of the series, we're going to be going through the objects functionality, and you can click on the video here to get started.